What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Last week with the Game Awards, we had a ton of new reveals that were shown, with one in particular really standing out because it caused an incredible amount of backlash online, really having people question why it was even there in the first place, but we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about more bad news around the RAM and SSD shortage, with one major manufacturer once again backing away from some of the consumer side of things. And we'll also be talking about a new handheld. This one, while it's geared towards gaming, also apparently comes with a phone, which, hey, that does answer the age-old question from now on if you all have phones. All of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're here every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, keeping you up to date in the world of gaming. So even if you don't have a notification pop up, just know there's probably a video here for you in the morning. And we're going to start today with Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Had a massive showing at the Game Awards, racking up 9 different wins, and that is the new record now. Put them ahead of The Last of Us Part 2 that had 7. Well, along with this, they decided to release a thank you update for the game, and you can see some of the trailer here and some of the content that's now released. A new playable environment, there's new music tracks, a challenging boss battles within the Endless Tower, there's an official photo mode, a ton of localization efforts here, now bringing the total number of supported languages to 19. They added FSR4 support, along with just more optimizations, it seems, really focusing even on handheld PC systems like the Steam Deck and others. So really cool update just to kind of throw out there. It is free, and if you have the game, you can go ahead and download it now and just take advantage of all these additional features and quality of life improvements. But again, this game did incredible at the Game Awards. I think it was the only game, if I'm not mistaken, that won multiple awards. Everything else is just kind of singular wins for different games. But here comes Clair Obscur that even had people wondering, should we put a limit on how many wins a game can have at the awards? No, I mean, the game is just good, so if you want to win awards, you also have to make a game that's that good, or at least wins over the judges to that degree. Also, one of the big reveals of the night is a new Mega Man game, and some of the trailer had people really honing in on certain aspects. One in particular at the end is the trademark whistle for Protoman. So, okay, Mega Man Dual Override. We have Mega Man Dual Override. Is Protoman part of this game? And that seems obvious. You'd figure with Mega Man in general, why wouldn't you add in Protoman? But now people are wondering if maybe there'll be a playable character, as in you go into the game and you can pick maybe Mega Man or Protoman. There's also been some discussions around the idea of Bass being in the game, so maybe there's 3 playable characters, or Protoman maybe is just kind of that anti-hero that's just around, and it's another Mega Man and Bass type game. So there's still a lot of questions around this title since it's not even out till 2027 to coincide with the 40th anniversary for the franchise. But I do kind of figure that Capcom is going to string us along with different updates here and there for the game, just little reveals as we get closer and closer towards its release date. The footage that we saw, though, was very early on, apparently, so I'm also kind of holding out on that to see what the final product is going to look like, because it also caught a lot of criticism. However, I do wonder what people are expecting now a 2D Mega Man game to look like after Mega Man 11. To me, seeing it, the proportions of Mega Man are much better, and just I think it's going to just look a lot better than what we had even with Mega Man 11. Again, we're probably a year and a half away minimum from the thing releasing anyway. Oh, and it looks like Deus Ex Remastered has been delayed. We can see this from Aspire. They say, thank you to the community for your feedback following the reveal of Deus Ex Remastered. We've listened to what you said, and in order to better meet fan expectations and deliver the best possible experience for players, Deus Ex Remastered will no longer launch on February 5th, 2026. No mention as to when it's going to come out. They just say they will communicate as they get maybe more comfortable or confident, we'll say, in a release date. And I mean, I saw the footage, and sure, it didn't look like it was the highest quality thing, but it's Aspire, and I don't really expect the world from them with some of these remasters or remakes that they do. It's like a nice, like you turn it, it's a nice B experience. This is kind of where my expectations are with Aspire. So I guess we'll see when they're ready to show more about it. I'm thinking probably towards the end of this year, they'll show up with, I guess, a different look for the game, or it's going to be higher quality. I get it, it's Deus Ex. There is a lineage to that entire franchise, so if you're going to touch the original, you should probably do a pretty good job with it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Game Awards last week that happened on Thursday with a bunch of reveals, and we went over everything line by line last Friday to keep everyone up to date and go through it much faster than the 3.5 hour with the pre-show runtime that we experienced that night. But you go through that entire show and you feel like Jeff will have a good one last thing or one big closeout like game to show off, and not really. So what happened was towards the end, we were of course getting to Game of the Year. People understand we're getting close to that one last reveal, which happens. Jeff builds it up, and then we're greeted with, as you can see, High Guard. It's a live service PvP style game. Yeah, wasn't going to sit well, and in fact, it has not. And because it was the one last thing of the night, a massive spotlight's been placed on it. So if you look online, I mean, it's getting crushed on YouTube. A lot of the, of course, official trailers are posted up in places like IGN and other publications. Guys, it's like a 90% dislike. In some cases, also it's 95% dislike. So immediately, this game is behind the 8 ball. And I do wonder if this was something that happened maybe earlier in the show. It was just kind of not lost in the shuffle, but you know what I mean? Somewhere in the middle of the show, and it wasn't played up as this big closeout experience for the show. If it would have gotten this kind of backlash, I feel like that is part of it, is they really built this up, and then here comes High Guard. That's this, I mean, it kind of starts to blend in a bit with a lot of these live service games that, let's face it, people really don't have a lot of confidence in right now, and there's just a stigma to them. So the importance that was placed on it as to close out the show versus what we've had, say, in the last 5 years. Intergalactic was last year, Naughty Dog's brand new game. They're, of course, going to be, I'm sure, pushback to it because it's Naughty Dog, and look what happened with Last of Us Part 2. But it's Naughty Dog's new game, so there is a reason to be like, okay, that makes sense to close out. Monster Hunter Wilds, massive IP with Monster Hunter, so yeah, it makes sense 2023. Final Fantasy 16, 2022, we saw gameplay, everything for it. That's also a big release. The Matrix Awakens Unreal Engine 5 demo, remember that one, the experience they did, it was a limited time thing, it released right then and there, and the visuals were incredible. That was 2021. And then 2020, kind of a shame, it's Mass Effect, remember that? Yeah, still not out, but that was at least something that was a big deal, and it made sense. So if you go Mass Effect, Matrix Awakens, Final Fantasy 16, Monster Hunter Wilds, Intergalactic, and then High Guard, you go, okay, yeah, something isn't quite fitting in here. So I do at least understand the backlash. The thing that was a little confusing to me is Jeff did what he usually does. He puts out a poll to gather feedback and is like, give the Game Awards a letter grade. How'd you feel about it? And the majority was D. So I don't really get that one. It wasn't, I mean, everyone didn't vote for F, which is good. But D, really? I mean, it was D or B. B was the second most votes. But I don't know if I look at that show and say D, but then you look at the comments and it's a lot of why'd you close out with High Guard, basically. So it does then pose the question, can something like a closeout game really hurt the entire show? It's sort of what we talk about with directs or state of plays or any of these kinds of events where you can have a show, but then if the last thing that they reveal is massive and incredible, all of a sudden the show could jump to a B or an A for you because of that last impactful game that gets shown off. You know, I did think about it a little, and I said, what was the last one that I really remember as being bad? And it might have been that Fast and the Furious game. Do you remember that? That was a long time ago, but yeah, Jeff has done this before, but not in recent years. And the thing with that is Jeff is very plugged in and knowledgeable about the gaming industry and even just the online with social media and stuff. So he probably knew this was going to happen. The stigma around live service is right now is so obvious that he should know. And so that's why the only conclusion I can come to is, man, they must have paid out some good money for High Guard to close out the show. That's the only thing that at least makes sense. And then, you know what, from Jeff's perspective, yeah, I can kind of understand, because there was a lot of other good stuff that was shown there, but hey, if they show up with the bag and you just got to show High Guard at the end and then go to Game of the Year and Claire Obscure wins and everyone's happy, it's like, all right, we'll pull the trigger on that one. Next up, let's talk about bad news still around the RAM and SSD shortage. Right now, RAM is at the forefront, but I think solid state shortage for drives or NVMe, any of these flash storage, it's really going to start to kick in as we get into 2026, first or second quarter. I think we're going to see prices really spike, but there is now some thought that maybe it won't, say, extend too far into 2027. I think 2026 is going to be pretty rough, but we can see this. This is over on Tweaktown, and they say in a new video from leaker Moore's Law is dead, we're to expect that Samsung's long-term exit from SATA SSD production is coming in January. They warn that Samsung is diving out of the SATA SSD business, could tighten supply and jack up the prices of SSD storage across the board in the months ahead, on top of all of the skyrocketing prices of RAM right now. And yeah, RAM in general is, as I mentioned, the big thing that's making headlines currently, but solid state storage, that SD cards, anything with external storage that's like flash based, you're going to see, I think, go up in price. And it could be 20% or so, but it's hard to find them. It could be as much as 50, 100%. Look what's happened with RAM currently, and then you start to think a bit about the SSD side. However, the thing when it comes to RAM, so we see the pricing online. It's pretty obvious from the consumer angle right now, where 64 gigabytes of DDR5, it costs more than a PS5. Some people are posting up listings where it's $900 some odd, which is absolutely absurd for that. But when I do look online, $400, $500, $600, that's actually fairly common for 64 gigabytes of DDR5, which is mind-blowing right now. So from the manufacturing angle, if we look here, this is over on TrendForce, who, as you expect, yeah, they track trends in the market for technology. And the strategy that they believe is about to happen, as again, they're also citing sources and just market research, is that you're going to see manufacturers pull back on some of the RAM that they put in different devices. Smartphones, as an example, rather than say mid-range at 6 to 12 gigabytes, you might go 6 to 8 gigabytes, right? Or from 4 to 8 for entry, just be 4 gigabytes. Or on the laptop side, apparently 8 gigabytes is going to be much more common. And that sounds crazy because, well, Windows struggles as it is with almost infinite RAM. So 8 gigabytes, I can only imagine what kind of an experience it'll be. Now, you might say, well, we can just upgrade that. And maybe. Here's the other issue. In order to cut down on costs, they might just solder the 8 gigabytes directly to the board. That's been a common practice with some of these budget-oriented laptops, but that could continue to spread even into the mid-range. Just, again, they're trying to figure out how to not make it so the laptop that was $600 yesterday is $1,200 today. So right now, my advice is if you're good on storage, you're good on RAM, sit tight, and hopefully sounds bad, but by 2027, we see some of this alleviate a bit when it comes to the shortages around parts, components, everything there. Because the concern is if we go into 2027 and we're still seeing what I think are going to be short-term spikes, just kind of level off and continue, that's going to get rough, and you're going to see more of these manufacturers for laptops and PCs and phones have to get even more creative. So I don't know if the AI bubble stuff is going to burst, and then all of a sudden these data centers are kind of unneeded, like they're not really necessary, and then parts just start to flood the market all over again. But right now, it's very uncertain heading into 2026 with some of the news around things like Samsung pulling away from even SSD, like SATA drives, but then also Micron getting away from consumers. It's getting rough out there, we'll see. Next up, let's talk about a really cool looking handheld, and part of that for me is just seeing it through nostalgia goggles, because there was an old handheld phone that I really liked that it's a shame it didn't work out for Sony, because I think it would have been kind of cool to see maybe a run of these over the last decade or so where it continues to get more and more advanced. Well, AYANEO appears to be going back to the well, and you can see it here. Tell me what phone or gaming handheld this looks like to you. Yeah, it has like the slide up feature there with the D-pad. We have A, B, X, and Y, and it looks like almost the circle touchpads there. So this is AYANEO's new device that they're calling the AYANEO Pocket Play, and it is indeed a take on the Xperia Play from years and years ago with Sony, when they made that attempt to where it was a phone that you would slide up, and it looked like a PSP Go at that point. But, I mean, it was a full-fledged Android phone that you could use and play Android games. We also had PS1 games that Sony put out on Android that you could play. There was a whole, like, Xperia Play app for that. It was cool stuff. Didn't work out. But hey, at least Sony took a shot at it, because that seems to have now spawned this device. Here's the thing though, all right? So phones just continue to get smaller, like thinner and thinner, right? They keep getting bigger, but then also thinner. Everyone wants apparently a large screen, but then don't want it to be more than so many millimeters thick or something. The problem you run into with these kinds of devices is that just by the nature of what they're trying to do, it's going to end up being a thicker phone. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that because I mean, when I look at a phone now, the one drawback again for playing games on it is it's very much touch based, as in you don't have physical buttons really on the device to play, say with a D-pad or face buttons like this, unless you attach an external controller, and that just makes the phone unwieldy to walk around with, or a clip for say a DualSense controller where it's a whole contraption at that point. I like the look of this AYANEO Pocket Play, and I'd be real curious to try it out, but my thing is, I think I'd rather just have it as its own handheld device, and then we already have a bunch of those, so it also has to at least function somewhat well as a phone for people to buy in and go, okay, well, this can be my next big upgrade, I guess, for a phone, and what's the cost on this, and like versus any of the more flagship devices, your iPhones, your Samsung Galaxies, or what have you. So still a lot of questions there. Apparently, we will see it go into Kickstarter here soon, and I guess we'll get more information around that launch. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Arcade 1UP, as right now, there's reporting going around, some speculation that they are shutting their doors. Now, this started up over on Reddit with an email that was posted and then reposted here by Wario64, where they say, "Beta team, I come to you with news I wish I didn't have to share. Arcade 1UP is closing operations. For the majority of us, our last day is this coming Friday. I cannot speak to the future of the brand. It is not my place to share what might be next and whom will be in charge of it. I do not know the plans for the arcade systems or the infinity tables. I believe they will continue to operate as they currently do, but I do not know for certain." So there were questions before about what happens with the arcade cabinets that have online play. Seems that one person from the company that works sort of on the online aspect to it said that there's a fallback plan for it and they should still operate, but we need to see if this is the case anyway for Arcade 1UP. This was an internal email allegedly that was shared, and is it hard to believe that Arcade 1UP would be going out of business? Not really, because while they started out at first as kind of this fun, like $300 arcade cabinet, still expensive, yes, but compared to what arcade cabinets would normally cost, where that ends up being a third, a quarter, depending on the arcade cabinet and the IP and stuff and how sought after it is. $300 brand new, you put it together yourself, but it wasn't that bad. Maybe you have a little wrench you got to work with and a screwdriver, but it went together in 30 minutes to an hour for the most part, right? It's a fun little afternoon project. And then you come out the other end with a new looking arcade cabinet. It was really cool, and some of them are compilation ones, so you felt like you had additional value to it, but then they started getting more and more expensive to where they were releasing $800, $1,000 arcade cabinets, and it just didn't make any sense anymore, because eventually you go, well, for a couple $100 more, I can just buy the original one, and then that will really tug on the nostalgia strings from the old pizza shop that had the Ninja Turtles cabinet there. It's like, what are we doing? So that was always the concern, is as they get too expensive, are people really still going to buy into this? Is nostalgia enough to hold up this $800 arcade cabinet that's kind of a conversation starter when you have people over and stuff? And it turns out that might not be the case. And then also you got to factor in parts and other components that are just getting more and more expensive behind the scenes. It's difficult to maintain that, and the IP contracts with franchises and the whole thing. So we'll wait to see confirmation on this, but it wouldn't shock me if we do hear in the coming days that Arcade 1UP is indeed closing down and this email is correct. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, did you buy an Arcade 1UP cabinet at some point? 91% say no. Hey, 9% say yes. And that's not shocking. Again, there are a lot of variables that need to line up for Arcade 1UP to even make a sale in the first place when it was $300 or $400. You have to have a place for the cabinet. They have to come up with a franchise that they can attach to it that you maybe want to buy. And you have to also have nostalgia for the idea of having an arcade cabinet potentially in your living room. So again, a lot has to line up. But then as it got more expensive, it's not shocking that people just kind of fell out of it. And I really haven't seen many people talk about Arcade 1UP at all in probably the last couple of years. So 9%, yeah, that's probably about right. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Sticks of Truth, says, it's Conquer without the curse words, with a character gaining developer powers. This was about the Badger game from David Salini, who, again, did the Mario Rabbids game with Nintendo and went off now and making their own game. And, you know, when you describe it like that, That does sound very, very creative, and it sounds like it stands out quite a bit from the pack. The idea, though, of going to different worlds, it being a parody of gaming, kind of in, again, a lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek nature, not really malicious about it, but you also gain powers from each area or world. That sounds like a good video game outright. Sounds like an interesting video game. So yeah, when I saw it, I wasn't really sure what I was looking at. More information has been coming out, and I'm interested. I'll be keeping an eye on this one as we go along to see what other weird trailers they want to show us in the future. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave going over the entirety of the Game Awards, I'll leave that up here in a video. Or maybe you want to check out a way to build a cheap 4K emulation box. I did a whole video on that over the weekend, and I'll leave it right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.